welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into something truly fascinating, the space race.
Yeah, it's more than just history, isn't it? It's like a core piece of the Cold War puzzle.
Exactly. You've got these two superpowers basically locked in this global standoff.
And space exploration becomes this huge stage for their competition, a battleground almost.
It really went beyond just armies and weapons.
Yeah.
The space race was, well, a very public way to show off tech skills.
Right. And for everyone listening, our mission today, our deep dive, is to peel back the layers, look past the rockets.
Just ask the astronauts, yeah. And really get into why this era mattered so much, what it tells us about, well, human ambition, technology, global power struggles.
Mm-hmm. And we're using some great source material to guide us, excerpts from Space Race, the ultimate Cold War showdown in the stars. It's from Cold War memories.
And it paints this picture of a world, like, right on the edge of nuclear war.
But at the same time, making these incredible, almost unbelievable leaps in technology. It's quite the contrast.
So where does this race actually, kick off? What's the starting gun?
Well, you really have to point to October 4th, 1957. That's the day the Soviet Union launched Sputnik.
Sputnik 1. Just a little beeping metal ball.
Technically, yes. A polished sphere sending back radio signals. Pretty basic stuff by today's standards.
Mm-hmm.
But the reaction globally, especially in the U.S., it was profound. A mix of genuine, awe, wow, they did it, but also a serious amount of anxiety, fear even.
Because it wasn't just anybody who did it first.
No.
It was the Soviets, America's main rival in the Cold War. So it wasn't just science.
No, it was a statement, a big one, about their capabilities. It made people in the U.S. think, okay, if they can put a satellite up there.
What else can they do?
Right.
Missiles, maybe?
Exactly. It sparked serious soul-searching in the U.S. about, where they stood technologically, where they've fallen behind.
So the response had to be decisive.
And it was. They moved pretty fast to create NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration.
Pulling everything together under one roof.
Right, to centralize things, speed up their own space efforts.
And they didn't just sit back after Sputnik, did they? The U.S. had its own launch pretty soon after.
Not long at all. January 1958, they launched Explorer 1.
Now, Explorer 1 was a bit different from Sputnik, wasn't it? It actually did some science up there.
It did. While Sputnik was fairly simple, Explorer 1 carried instruments, and it made a major discovery, the Van Allen radiation belts.
These zones of charged particles trapped by Earth's magnetic field.
Exactly. A really important piece of science about our planet's environment and space.
So even right at the start, you see this competition, not just getting to space, but doing something meaningful once you're there.
And what's really striking is how quickly things escalated once the 1960s hit.
Yeah, the pace just picked up like crazy.
The stakes kept getting higher. It turned into this relentless race for firsts. Every achievement was
a headline. A propaganda win.
Absolutely. Showing your system communism or capitalism was superior was baked right into it.
And for a while there, the Soviets seemed to be winning those headlines.
They definitely had the early lead. April 12, 1961, Yuri Gagarin, the first human to orbit the Earth.
Can you imagine hearing that news? The first person ever to circle the planet. And he was Soviet.
Another huge moment for the USSR. And it definitely ramped up the pressure on the U.S. side. They needed to respond, and respond big.
It kind of cemented that narrative for a bit anyway, that maybe the Soviet system was better at this science stuff.
Well, that perception directly led to probably the most audacious challenge of the whole race, President Kennedy's speech.
Yes. Setting the goal, land an American on the moon.
And not just someday. Before the end of the decade.
An absolutely staggering goal for the time. 1961, saying you'll be on the moon by 69.
Almost unbelievable. But it worked. It focused the entire nation's efforts, poured resources into
the Apollo program.
The Apollo program. A massive, incredibly complex undertaking, hundreds of thousands of people involved.
Pushing the limits of engineering, materials, computing, everything.
And we all know how it culminated. July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11.
Neil Armstrong stepping onto the moon.
His words, one small step. It wasn't just for him or the crew. It was watched by the whole world.
A defining moment. And you could say the moment the U.S. really pulled ahead in the race.
Arguably the peak, yes. The dramatic high point where the U.S. clearly achieved that specific, monumental goal.
Definitely defining. But it's important, our source mentions this too, it wasn't just about the astronauts. The guys in the capsules.
Oh, absolutely not. You can't forget the brilliant minds behind the rockets, behind the missions. They were just as crucial.
The engineers, the scientists, the managers.
Thousands of them. But two figures really stand out. For the U.S., you have Wernher von Braun,
the German rocket scientist, came over after World War II.
Right. His background was, well, complicated, but his expertise in large liquid-fueled rockets.
The kind you needed to get to the moon.
Exactly. It was absolutely fundamental to the American program, the Saturn V rocket. That was largely down to his team's work.
A huge technological asset. Leveraging that expertise was key.
And his Soviet counterpart, Sergei Korolev.
The chief designer.
Yeah.
Much more secretive.
Very much so. His identity wasn't widely known for years. But he was the driving force behind Sputnik, Gagarin's flight, all those early Soviet triumphs.
So you have these two geniuses, basically on opposite sides, pushing technology forward at an incredible rate.
Under immense pressure, too. It really shows that human ingenuity was at the heart of it all.
Now, the whole thing was obviously about competition, fierce competition. But the source also points out there were moments of cooperation. Seems counterintuitive.
It does, given the Cold War backdrop. But yes, even amidst all the rivalry, there were occasional bridges built.
Like what?
The big one was the Apollo-Soyuz test project in 1975.
Ah, the handshake in space.
That's the one. An American Apollo spacecraft docked with a Soviet Soyuz capsule. Astronauts and cosmonauts met, shook hands, shared meals in orbit.
Quite a picture. Two rival crews working together up there while their countries were still largely adversaries down here.
Symbolically, it was huge. A visible, if temporary, easing of tensions. Détente in action, you could say.
Did it have practical benefits too?
Yes, they learned a bit about each other's systems, docking procedures, safety protocols, and it sort of laid the groundwork, conceptually at least, for future international cooperation, like the ISS today.
So competition drove the initial burst, but eventually they found some common ground, even if limited. Interesting. Okay, let's zoom out. The source gives us 5 key ways to really understand the impact of the space race. What's the first one?
The first is just the sheer scale of technological advancements. It's undeniable.
Right. Things we still use today.
Absolutely. Satellite communication, for one. So much of our global network traces back to that era. Materials, science, new alloys, ceramics, composites developed for extreme conditions.
And computing. The need to miniaturize to increase power for guidance systems.
Drove huge leaps in computing, yeah. And things like weather satellites, TIRS-1 giving us the first TV picture from space, changed meteorology forever.
Okay, so tech advancements, number 1. What's number 2?
Number 2 is understanding the political contexts. You can't separate the space race from the Cold War.
It was a tool, essentially.
A major tool of foreign policy and propaganda. It was about showing which system, capitalism or communism, was more dynamic, more capable. It shaped international relations, how countries allocated resources.
Pouring money into space programs wasn't just about science. It was about projecting power.
Precisely. A very visible arena for that power struggle.
Makes sense. Third point.
The importance of personal narratives.
So the stories of the people involved.
Exactly. The astronauts, the cosmonauts, sure, but also the engineers, the flight controllers, even their families. Reading their accounts gives you a much richer, more human feel for it all.
Beyond the dates and mission names.
Right. You understand the sacrifices, the pressures, the triumphs on a personal level. It brings history to life.
Okay.
The cultural impact. This was huge.
How so?
The space race just grabbed the world's imagination. Think of all the books, the movies. Science fiction really took off.
Fueled by real events.
Totally. It inspired a whole generation to get interested in science, in engineering. It created this sense that, wow, anything is possible. Humans walking on the moon. It expanded our sense of horizons.
That feeling of boundless possibility.
Yeah.
Okay, and the 5th key insight.
Is to reflect on the legacy. How does it still affect us?
So connecting the past to now.
Yes. Much of today's space exploration, robotic missions to Mars, the rise of commercial spaceflight, it all builds on the foundations laid during the space race.
The technologies, the know-how.
And also that spirit of tackling huge, complex challenges. That drive continues not just in space, but in other fields too.
Okay, those 5 give a great framework.
Yeah.
But the source also has a couple of outside-the-box ideas for deeper understanding. The first is alternate history.
Yeah, it's a thought experiment, basically. What if things had gone differently?
Like, what if the Soviets had landed on the moon first?
Exactly. How would that have changed the Cold War? Technology development? Global politics? Thinking about those what-ifs really highlights the significance of what actually happened.
It makes you appreciate the turning points.
Okay.
And the other unusual angle.
Looking at the role of espionage.
The secret side of the race. Spies and secrets.
You bet. Both sides were desperate to know what the other was up to. Intelligence gathering, counterintelligence. It was all happening behind the scenes.
Trying to steal rocket plans, figure out launch schedules, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. It adds another whole layer of intrigue to the competition. A shadow war alongside the public race.
Fascinating. Okay, before we wrap up, there's a quirky fact in the source about Luna 2.
Ah, yes, the Soviet Luna 2 mission in 1959.
What was quirky about it?
Well, its mission wasn't to orbit or land softly. It was designed to crash.
Crash into the moon. On purpose.
On purpose, and it did, making it the very first human-made object to reach another celestial body.
Huh. So, not a soft landing, but still a major first, hitting the moon in 59.
Exactly. Crude by later standards, maybe. But it proved they could reach the moon and hit it. A stepping stone for future, more complex missions.
It really shows the different ways they were trying to score points, score firsts. So, looking back at this whole intense period, what's the big takeaway for you?
For me, it's just such a powerful demonstration of how national ambition and technological capability get tangled up with global influence.
Yeah, showing what you can do technologically becomes a way of showing your overall strength.
Right. And it also shows what humans can achieve when they're driven by, well, intense competition, but also maybe this underlying shared desire to explore, to push boundaries, even during a really tense political time.
And that legacy is still pushing us, isn't it? Missions to
Possible.
Mars, commercial space stations. You can see the echoes of the space race and all of that.
You absolutely can. Which brings us to a final thought for our listeners to ponder.
Go on.
Think about how that mix we saw, that fierce competition, and those moments of cooperation, how might that dynamic play out in the future as we face new global challenges or as we look further out beyond Earth?
Competition versus collaboration in tackling the next big things. Definitely something to think